30 سنة عايشين في هذا البيت، في هذه البيوت، لن نخرج من هذه البيوت إلا محملين بالهون على قبور.
אני אומר גם לידידינו הטובים ביותר, ירושלים היא בירת ישראל, וכפי שכל עם בונה בבירתו ואת בירתו, גם לנו שמורה הזכות לבנות בירושלים ואת ירושלים.
So I'd like to begin with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, who is an Israeli politician and policymaker. She's currently serving as the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, in charge of foreign relations, international economic development and tourism. She's also the co-founder and founding member of the UAE Israel Business Council. Speaking as well today will be Samer Abdelrazzak Sinijlawi, who is the chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund and head of diplomatic and international relations for the Fatah channel and reform stream, and a Fatah activist. Samer was president of the Palestinian Council of Young Political Leaders between 2000 and 2006. He runs this Jerusalem Development Fund, which essentially works on establishing development projects in the Palestinian territories. So that's who we have here today to be debating on the subject of the situation in Sheikh, Jarrah and Silwan. Now, the proposition to be debated is that Israel is entitled to evict tenants and demolish homes in East Jerusalem that infringe the law. Now, the ground rules for the debate are that we'll start off with the affirmative, with Fleur Hassan-Nahoum speaking for about 10 minutes to put out her position on this subject, on this matter, concerning the potential evictions in Sheikh, Jarrah and Silwan. And then we'll hand over to Samer Sinijlawi to take the negative position on the topic that we're debating. Without any more to do, let's start and hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, David. Wonderful to be on your program. And thank you, Samer, for always being my fantastic opponent in all the different debates that we appear opposite each other. We in Jerusalem consider ourselves very privileged to be a city of diversity. We are the most diverse city in the state of Israel. We have almost 40% Arab residents in our city, 25% ultra-Orthodox Jews. We have 22% secular Jews. We have the largest immigrant population in the country, and that's what makes Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Our incredible diversity and the fact that we can all live together, despite what it looks like on the outside, on a day-to-day, we all live together. Jerusalem is also a city of law and order. And the debates that have happened in the last few months are debates that are not new, legal issues that are not new, but unfortunately have been conflagrated politically in order to justify a confrontation, a conflict, the one that we saw in the last few months that was fueled mainly by Hamas, but also a little bit by Fatah as an excuse to cancel their elections. So I want to go through the different issues because they're very different. And like I said, they've been conflagrated together, But we're talking about different things happening in different places that, of course, from a communications perspective, everything is put together and Israel is the big bad wolf as usual in terms of the press. So I want to go through the different issues, and I want to go through also how they were used and invented as provocations to justify an unjustifiable conflict that we had a couple of months ago. So the first issue that I want to talk about is the fact, the reason that I believe the conflict occurred 2 months ago is because actually we were doing so well. And I'll explain what I mean. Israel is going through an external Abraham Accords, but also an internal Abraham Accords. And we can see this in a number of ways. Firstly, the external Abraham Accords have been game-changing and will be game-changing for the region. And that is that the Arab Gulf states have decided that they're no longer going to be taken hostage by the Palestinian conflict, and it's their moment to make peace with the state of Israel. And of course, the state of Israel is always open to making peace with any of our neighbors that want to make peace. We've proven that through the years. We've never started any wars, and our arms are always open. And so the Abraham Accords was something that kind of put off Hamas a little bit, because all of a sudden the Arab world is recognizing and legitimizing the existence of the state of Israel and is saying, you know what, we have our own concerns, we have our own common agenda, we have our own economic prosperity to worry about, and we're going to make peace with the state of Israel. And that's what happened. Now, of course, extremists like Hamas don't like this because it means that their own conflict is deprioritized. So that's the first reason why the conflict occurred 2 months ago. The second reason is that an Arab party, actually a Muslim Brotherhood party in the Israeli Knesset, for the first time in history, holds the balance of power of the Israeli government, which is incredible. The joint list have never taken part in any government, but for the first time, this guy called Mansour Abbas says, you know what, I want to take care of the Arab Israelis, enough being the spokesperson of the Palestinian Authority of the Fatah movement. We are here to serve our constituents, something that I think they very cleverly learned from the ultra-Orthodox, who are not themselves, call themselves Zionists, but they're there in order to serve their people. And this is what Mansour Abbas took. Hamas doesn't like that also because they are Muslim Brotherhood like, and that's why, you know, what they're saying, you know, all of a sudden, now the Arabs in the state of Israel are now legitimizing the state of Israel. And the third piece to this puzzle, I believe, is Jerusalem. And contrary to what Samer will say in a few minutes, Jerusalem is actually building incredible bridges between East and West Jerusalem. 5 years, and we have a long way to go, and with that Samer and I can agree on. 5 years ago, you know, something unprecedented happened in Jerusalem, and that is a Jerusalem Affairs Minister called Zev Elkin said, we can't on the one hand say that we're one city, and on the other hand, you know, ignore the interest and not provide the resources needed in East Jerusalem. And I agree with him. You can't do both at the same time. And so 5 years ago, something changed in the mentality of the Israeli government. We brought in unprecedented budgets, 2.1 billion shekels for three things: improvement of physical infrastructure, economic development in terms of quality employment, especially for the young people. In other words, the startup nation embracing East Jerusalem. And the third is education. How do we improve schools, infrastructure, and the education itself so there's more integration? So again, these steps that were made have created a situation where more and more East Jerusalemites are saying, you know what, we'd be happy to be under the Jerusalem municipality because they at least are giving us something. It's not enough, but they're giving us something. The Palestinian Authority are giving us nothing. And so these are the kind of moves that have angered the extremist elements in Hamas that wanted to, you know, make sure that the world remembered that they're there, that the Palestinian conflict exists, and that they wanted to, of course, make a linkage to Jerusalem so that they can justify this. They can justify this spiritually and in terms of other Muslims around the world. And this is the reason why we have the conflict. Now, what are the reasons they used for the conflict? And this is why I will get to the point of Sheikh Jarrah. A property dispute that's been going on for 40 years. Since the 1980s, there's been a property dispute that that it's very simple. The Arab families in these certain homes in Sheikh Jarrah cannot prove ownership. They never have been able to prove ownership. And a Jewish Sephardi trust from the Ottoman times that can prove ownership. Since the 80s, it's been going on. And what's very disappointing to me is that the courts actually found a solution. And the solution so that these families would not be kicked out. And the solution was declare a protected tenancy, and then you don't have to be kicked out. Protected tenancy is something that is used in many parts of the world to protect tenants, okay? And at the beginning, these families accepted it. And then, of course, they get the Palestinian leadership who like to cynically use their own people and throw them under the bus, saying, don't accept it. They don't care if they get kicked out because this gives them wonderful headlines against Israel across the world. And this is what's happening, throwing their people under the bus, getting kicked out. Now, I want to say a few things here. It hurts me to see anybody kicked out of anywhere. You know, Jews were kicked out of Sheikh Jarrah, which is also called Shimon HaTzadik, in 1948. This is how we got to this mess. We got to this mess because Jordan illegally occupied East Jerusalem between 48 and 67. This is how we got to this mess to begin with. The Jews who lived in these homes were displaced themselves, okay? So I, as a Jew that knows and has the memory of the suffering of Jews getting displaced, the last thing I want to see is innocent Arab families getting displaced. And that's why I'm angry that they didn't take the protected tenancy, which was a legal solution that was offered to them. Now, the courts cannot not bring law and order. The courts cannot ignore the laws of the state of Israel and say, you know what, let's be nice, let's not kick them out. There was a legal solution. Unfortunately, the legal solution was not taken. Now, these are the same courts, and our high court, this has gone to the Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court is a very ethical court. It's a court that has rerouted the separation fence. It's a court that has kicked out settlers from private Palestinian property in the West Bank. This is the same court. Now, you can't say on the one hand, these courts, yes, they're right to kick out settlers from private Palestinian lands in the West Bank that can't prove ownership, and on the same time say, well, we can't accept the decision of the court when the property ownership belongs to a Jewish trust. If we accept that Israel is a country of law and order, if we accept the legitimacy and the fairness of the High Court of Justice, we cannot pick and choose, and we cannot cherry pick which decisions are right and which are wrong. What happened was that the timing was horrible, and it happened in the same week as the end of Ramadan, the same week as the Jerusalem Day, the same week as all the conflagration. And ultimately, the saddest thing of all is that Jerusalem is also just a city that is trying to serve its residents. But everybody conflagrates all their political frustrations on one city of almost 1 million people that we in the city are trying to serve. And so ultimately, you know, what I want to see is a peaceful solution. What I want to see is East Jerusalem residents prospering. What I want to see is real economic development where the young engineers, the young Arab engineers, men and women that are now in our colleges in the biggest numbers than ever, I want to embrace them into the prosperity of Jerusalem so that East Jerusalem is the same, prospers as much as West Jerusalem, and we can all live in a shared society. And this is the work that I do day to day. Thank you very much.
Your timing is immaculate, Fleur. I think you've just hit the 10-minute mark and I didn't have to stop you. Okay, I'll hand the baton over to Samir to
thank you.
speak on his position in the negative on this matter of the evictions and demolitions occurring currently or under threat of taking place in East Jerusalem. So go ahead, you've got 10 minutes, Samir.
Well, thank you very much, David, for inviting both of us, and thanks, Fleur, for joining again another debate. I always enjoy debating you, although we are on a different parts of facts, but I think you are a very nice politician, and you express your point of view in a very nice way. So thank you for coming to this debate. I would like to start by where you ended. You ended by saying that a court has no other choice but implementing the law. Unfortunately, wisdom says that a law does not define justice. Sometimes some laws are unjust. It's a fact. If they are not based on equality, if they are based on discrimination, then unfortunately the law is injustice, and implementing the law is implementing injustice. And I'll tell you why this law is unjust, Fleur. If I ask you, can a Palestinian now, can my grandfather now claim the ownership of his land next to the American embassy in West Jerusalem? You will tell me no. If I can tell you, if Edward Said family, for example, the famous philosopher, can claim his home in Talbiya or in the German colony in West Jerusalem, you will say no. But any Jew can claim, which is only a 75 years old ownership, and it's proved. They have the deeds, they have the documents, and it's thousands of cases. The whole West Jerusalem is owned by Palestinians. Some government offices are owned by Palestinians in West Jerusalem, and it goes all over Israel, in Nazareth, in Jaffa. I have relatives in Jordan that own properties in Jaffa that worth billions of US dollars, billions, and they have the documents, they have everything, but they cannot claim it back because the law says only Jews can claim their property if it is after the year 1850. So almost 170 years ago, if any Jew can present any document, they have the right to claim it. But if a Palestinian comes, and there are thousands of Palestinians, and try to claim their properties in West Jerusalem or anywhere else, then they cannot by law. So there is a problem on this law. It's not just. And this brings us back to the roots of the problem. Well, you have touched the surface, Fleur. You are correct. It may look as a real estate dispute. It is very political, Fleur. It's very political because these properties were confiscated by the Jordanian government, whether you claim it is an occupation or not. But for us as Palestinians, we have accepted the rule of Jordan. We have joined their parliament. We have joined voluntarily the Jordanian parliament in the 49 and 50. And we kept voting, and we were equal citizens with full rights. We were heading governments during the Jordanian rule of the West Bank. So it was in our acceptance, we approved it, we wanted, we participated in the political process. While when Israel came and occupied East Jerusalem, nobody consulted with us, whether we would like to be citizens or residents, or whether we want Israel to rule over us or no. Nobody consulted, and you kept pushing us in the corner, in the dark, not participating in anything. And you have just mentioned in your presentation that it was still until 5 years ago when a minister came and said, let's do something in East Jerusalem. So 50 years of absentees. We did not exist in front of the Israeli system. What's happening in the Sheikh Jarrah is that there was a lack of follow-up from the Jordanian government. The Jordanian government signed an agreement with these residents. These residents came as refugees from Jaffa. They own properties in Jaffa, Fleur, and they cannot claim it back. All of them, they came from Jaffa and from Lod area, and they have their properties. They cannot claim it. They came as refugees, and the Jordanian government decided to give them as a deal of giving up their refugee rights and benefits, their refugee cards, to give them ownership on this property. They started the process, then came the war of 67, and the Jordanian government did not continue. So they gave up their refugee rights. They bought it, actually. They contributed financially in buying these properties, but the Jordanian government did not conclude the process of issuing the deed. And there was a lot of testimony from the Jordanian government that this was correct. So for us, this is a political issue. It's a displacement, a continuing displacement. I think as far as we don't have a political solution for Jerusalem, we will keep facing this this kind of discrimination, we will keep feeling that we are under occupation, whether you would like to see it this way or not. I know the Israelis trying to avoid the word occupation or apartheid. It bothers them, and it bothers anybody that would like to feel that he's out of these war crimes and out of these dark stains in its history. Any nation would like to avoid this. But for us, for millions of Palestinians, for 380,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem, we feel it every day. We feel occupation. We feel the burden of occupation. It's not a choice. It's not something that we would like to talk about. We enjoy talking about. We live it, and we endure the hardness of this occupation. This city, Fleur and David, I think it's bigger than any nation. Jerusalem. Jerusalem is bigger than any religion. Jerusalem is bigger than any state. Jerusalem is related to billions of Christians, billions of Muslims, tens of millions of Jews. It is directly connected to these billions of people. Nobody can claim exclusivity. It's a city that has binationality. There are 40% Palestinians that could have been more, but everything is running against us, Fleur. The Knesset is running against us with the legislation that has been done every day from 67 until now. Everything, the legislation system, the Knesset works against the Palestinians. The municipality works against the Palestinians. The police, the Shin Bet, the government, everything that is so powerful, collective, is working against us. And yet we are 40% until now. When we started in 67, we were 26%, and despite that we are running against the stream, against the wind, we have reached to 40%. It means that we are so attached to this city. We love this city. This city can be diverse, but this city is suffering from poverty. It's the poorest city maybe in Palestine, Israel, unfortunately. So in a way or another, we are torturing this city by a broken strategy that is mainly led by the Israeli side, because we are not controlling anything. You are the powerful side. You can decide alone what to do. You don't need to consult with us. I hope that always when you decide something, you judge its morality, not only its legality, because the legal system has been decided against us. So nobody can claim exclusivity of this city. We need to know how to live and survive in equality, and equality starts by acknowledging the right of the others. You need to acknowledge that there are political rights of the Palestinians, not only traffic lights, not only some services. There should be acknowledgement of the political rights of the Palestinian people. We feel Palestinians. We feel Jerusalem is also our capital. We feel Jerusalem is Palestinian. We are ready to recognize that it is also Israeli. It is also Jewish. We already recognize that it is also Christian, but we need to have this language also coming from top officials. A change should start from Bennett, from Lapid, from Fleur, from the mayor, from the elite that is ruling in Israel. There should be a change. We are pushing the things to a catastrophe, like the visit to Al-Aqsa, the praying of some Jewish group in Al-Aqsa. Also, although it is a debatable issue, the Orthodox and the Haradim, they say the Israelis cannot even enter to Al-Aqsa, not only pray, but some small minority to the far right, they have a certain philosophy, and everybody is trying to fulfill their desire and putting this gunpowder bag into test with fire. If we continue doing this, if we continue not looking in the mirror and seeing the facts as they are, this Middle East conflict might shift to a global religious war. If people will fight each other in each mosque and each Bet Knesset all over the world, we don't want to reach this. We want to control it. We want to calm it. We are capable to live together. We are capable to start seeing each other as the solution for each other and not the problem of each other. There is nothing wrong with the majority of the Palestinians in their relations and the way they see Israelis. And I am sure that there is nothing wrong in the majority of Israelis the way they would like to see the relations with the Palestinians. But we have a lot of psychological barriers. We have a lot of ignorance, and ignorance is our mutual enemy. We don't know each other. A small example, it's me and Fleur. I mean, we were fighting each other on tweet without knowing each other. And now I think we have a better working relation. At least we can exchange some ideas. At least we can believe, we trust each other. At least I can trust when she says something, she believes in it, or she needs to defend it because she's a politician. I mean, sometimes her position as a politician is different than her personal. It happens by everybody. But I think...
Let's stop there, Samir, because we're over time, and you'll get plenty of opportunity to talk again when we resume. So what I'm going to do is now ask each of you a question, if you like, and then we will give you both a chance to sum up and respond to what the other person has been saying. Okay, the first I want to ask you, Fleur, since you began, I want to ask you a question based upon the comments you've made, where you've acknowledged that for years permits haven't been given to East Jerusalem residents seeking to build new homes. And you've said that your administration has started to make that process easier. But you've said the land reclamation law necessarily has favored Jews in order to protect Israel's character. Now, there's a concern clearly by many Arab Palestinians who believe that they have no way of building legally because the permits are never granted, so they build illegally and Israel demolishes. What do you have to say to this concern?
So yes, listen, for many years, and I think that we have to unpack why it is that residents weren't getting permits to build, okay? And of course, there's a political element, but there's also a very, very real element of land registration. Land registration in East Jerusalem is a real problem. I can tell you that because this morning I started my day with an investor who wants to invest in a high-tech park in East Jerusalem. We're trying to figure out how many owners own this property in order to be able to give them the money to develop. This is not something we're doing to make profits for the Jews. This is something we're doing for the economic development of East Jerusalem. And Samir is aware of how involved I am in trying to push forward all these developments in East Jerusalem. So the main problem in East Jerusalem is land registration. That it's not clear who things belong to. There's no real deeds. The Israel Land Authority is a terribly bureaucratic organization. And so the first thing the mayor of Jerusalem did when he got into office 2.5 years ago was to pass this law called the Mukhtar law, the Mukhtar protocols, which means that now the documentation of the local Mukhtar, which means the local chief or head of the community, is now considered a legal document that the Jerusalem Municipality Building and Planning Commission and the Israel Lands Authority can now use as a legal document. Now, it seems like a procedural thing, but it's huge because what it's done is that it's allowed local communities in East Jerusalem to be able to provide proof of ownership that is not Israeli proof of ownership, which is the only thing that was counted. So that's been a game changer. Has it fixed all the wrongs? No. Are we almost there? Not yet. But what I can tell you is we've got, and Summer's right, 50 years of gap of developing, of moving forward that we have to make up for. We have 1,000 classrooms that we are building that is the gap in the education system in East Jerusalem. By the way, there's lots of classrooms missing in West Jerusalem as well, but 1,000 classrooms. This year we built 3 schools. We're getting there. It's still a long, long way to go. And I'm not saying that the process has been cleaned of injustice, but we are trying to at least provide land opportunity. I brought in a huge investment for housing in East Jerusalem that's going to be happening in Bet Safafa. And so yes, Samer, you're right, but give us a chance to make up for this. And I think that Samer paints a very negative picture in terms of what the East Jerusalemites think of I work with Arabs every single day. Thousands here work in City Hall, thousands of nonprofits, of volunteers that work with us, worked strongly with us during the corona. We work with local community boards, as they call them, community councils in all the Arab neighborhoods. These are positions that are paid for by City Hall, employing, of course, Arab leaders to be able to lead their neighborhood. We've just opened in Abu Tor, we've just opened a branch of the municipality to provide services that is in the neighborhood rather than having to come to City Hall, that is more accessible and friendly and in Arabic. We are trying very hard to close those gaps. Rome wasn't built in a day. And this is something I've said to Samer before. If you actually look at what we're doing, you won't find an occupier, you will find a partner in developing services and developing quality of life for your people.
You guys, Israelis and Jews, you really know and understand what is the national aspiration, because you have dreamed for it. You have dreamed for your own state. You have worked for it. It was the most important thing for you. And now you enjoy having it. So for the Palestinians, you cannot localize the Palestinian problem. You cannot say that I'm dealing only giving some advantages for those Palestinians in East Jerusalem, but I am putting Gaza in siege. These people for 20 years are not allowed to see the outside the Gaza or to have access to the world. And then area A in the West Bank, we leave them for the PA. Area C, it's something else. You cannot localize the Palestinian problem. You cannot say that let's forget about the refugees. We as a nation, we have one aspiration. We need to fulfill our aspiration. Israelis need to understand the general Palestinian cause and the general Palestinian problem. Part of it is Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem in particular, Fleur, what's really frustrating is that it's not enough you grant one permit for a house here or for a building here. You have been designing, sponsoring, as municipality and as government, mass, thousands, tens of thousands of housing units for Jews, neighborhoods, areas. You have been giving state land, state-owned land to these projects, opening big tenders, nothing for East Jerusalem, nothing for Palestinians, not a single housing project that was sponsored by the government. And now there is around 30,000 unit demand, and the whole Palestinian pieces of land does not provide more than 1,000 unit demand. So if the solution does not come from the government, if the solution does not come from the political side, if we don't come to a political solution very quickly, this problem will be deteriorating and the gap will be bigger and bigger between Israelis and Palestinians. So the solution is political. The solution is at the top of the pyramid. I need to be optimistic that the coalition of Bennett and Lapid could lead to something. At least Lapid looks a guy that is very much interested in the two-state solution, although I believe it is dead already long ago. There is no possibility. There is no land that can be given for a Palestinian state. I think we should always focus into trying to find a one-state solution that is good for everybody. This is what we left, because we are living now in a one-state reality, in a discrimination reality, in an apartheid reality, and it needs to change as quick as possible, because the Palestinian rights have been waiting for 70 years and more, and it cannot be pending anymore. We cannot lose more time. The only thing that the world cannot compensate Palestinian. You can compensate us on land that you have confiscated, but who's going to compensate us on our lives that has been spent in a very harsh conditions, lacking rights? This time that we lose, this time that has been our life that has been stolen by Israel, and now unfortunately also by the PA, nobody is able to compensate us on this stolen time.
I've got a question now to ask you, Samir. When you were speaking earlier, you were speaking about the refugees after 1948 who were granted ownership of properties in territory which in fact, between 48 and 67 was not legitimately Jordan's. Jordan's sovereignty over those territories where it was granting ownership was only recognized by Pakistan and the United Kingdom. So there was no legitimacy for Jordan to do any granting of property ownership when it had no legitimacy over this territory. Further to this, going into the case that's been dragging on for decades, I understand that the tenants of these properties in Sheikh Jarrah actually signed an agreement where they accepted that the ownership was not theirs, and they're now seeming to renege against an agreement that they originally signed, which has led to the matter dragging out for such a long time. Would you like to respond to these two concerns that I've just raised?
Well, thank you for saying that Jordan rule was not legitimate, since it was recognized only by two states. Then automatically I can tell you that Israel rule in East Jerusalem is not legitimate, because it's also not recognized by more than 4 or 5 states all over the world. So I can agree with you. Let's say, fine, whatever Jordan has done between 48 and 67 is not legitimate. Whatever Israel has done between 67 and 2021 is also not legitimate. And this is what we are claiming. This is what we are saying. We are saying that this court that is deciding on the issue is not legitimate. It's part of the occupation. We have not been represented in the Knesset that has been issuing these laws and imposing these laws on us. So we have been simply treated as subjects, and we continue to be treated as subjects. So retroactively, let's cancel everything that has happened between 48 and 2001. And then who is going to be the sovereign in this area? The Palestinians themselves? Fine. Let's give them the mechanism to be controlling their city, ruling their city, imposing sovereignty on their city, and then negotiating with the western part of the city how we can create a unified city. Because I really feel belonging to both sides of the city. I love the neighborhoods in West Jerusalem, and I know that lots of Israelis enjoy coming to Old City or the east part of Jerusalem. And this city should be united, should be open to everybody. Now, unfortunately, it's divided. What's keeping things calm, like yesterday night and the night before, is thousands of police and border police and intensive security, surveillances, cameras. I have a house in the Old City, and I can see that in every corner, between one camera and camera, there is only 1 meter. The surveillance, there is no privacy in the Old City. You can literally, they can listen what's happening between a wife and a husband in each house.
Can you just stick to the questions? What you're saying now, you can have plenty of time later.
So I say that if Jordan didn't, you claim that Jordan was not in a proper way to govern, then Israel is also not in a proper situation in governing. And for the legalities, I'm really not a legal expert. I don't know the details of the file, but for me, this is not a legal issue. This is a very political issue. It's part of the law itself. There is something wrong in the law that allows Jews to claim properties and does not allow Palestinians to claim. And the law, unfortunately, prevents Palestinians from claiming their properties and allows Jews to claim their properties. This is a big issue. The refugees, the property, the Nakba, the displacement of the Palestinians. It's a very big issue. You cannot summarize it by some technicalities or some legal details that was part of a law that everybody is debating about its justice. It's a very big issue. When you give the right to a Jew to make aliyah to Israel because his maybe ancestor 2,000 years ago maybe have lived here in this country. And you do not allow somebody that left this country 70 years ago to come back. This is injustice. Whatever you call it, it's injustice. What's the difference? Why do you allow somebody after 2,000 years to come back and you deny that somebody that left only 70 years away to come back? So the global conflict, the global issue should be, you know, discussed while we talk these small details, while we discuss small details. You cannot isolate case by case from the political atmosphere, from the historical background of the issue.
Okay, that's you've gone again beyond the legal question that I raised, or legal point I made, and you've kind of gone into the political arena again, Samir. So do you want to respond quickly? I'll give you just a couple of minutes to say something about what Samir was just saying.
I want to say that it's very typical. It's a very typical conversation, and I'll tell you why. Because in all of, and this is really the main problem with the Palestinians is that they take zero responsibility for anything that's happened here. They take zero responsibility for the fact that in 1948, they could have taken the two-state solution. They didn't take it. Not only that, 3 days after a state was declared, we had war on our hands. We didn't start a war. We just wanted to live in peace in a very small country. We just wanted to live in peace in our indigenous homeland, a very small country, okay? And all the Arab countries around Israel launched a war to destroy Israel. Now, if they would have succeeded, that would have been the second genocide and Jewish genocide in 10 years. Now, what happened as a result of that completely, erroneous, this is the biggest mistake the Palestinians made was not accepting the two-state solution. I think most Palestinians would agree, okay? And this was in 1948. What happened? That Jews from the countries that attacked Israel, from all those Arab countries and beyond, were displaced too. These are my people. My husband's family are Iraqi, my mother's family are Moroccan. And so is anybody compensating us for the land and the money and the businesses that we had to leave because we were being attacked on the streets of the countries that we called home? Anybody compensating us? I don't think so. And why? Because the Palestinians didn't take the two-state solution. They could have, they didn't. Their Arab brothers made it worse for them. We continue. We carried on. 1948, they could have still taken that bit of land, and they didn't. The main Palestinians were living in the West, were living in Jordan and Egypt. The West Bank was Jordanian, and Gaza was Egyptian. There was no Palestine as such. It was Jordan and Egypt. We continue. 1967 again, a war we didn't start with the main purpose of destroying the state of Israel. And the land that we conquered was land that was the buffer zone between us surviving and not surviving. Now, you tell me something. Is there absolutely no price to pay for being the belligerent party again and again? Is there no price to pay for having all of the Arab countries attacking little Israel that by some miracle survived, that has no consequence whatsoever? Of course it does. War is ugly. War displaces people. Nobody knows that better than the Jewish people. But ultimately, we have to take care of our survival. And what this region has taught us is that we cannot depend on our neighbors, and we cannot depend even on the people living in our own country to let us live side by side in dignity, which is the only thing that Israel has ever wanted. And the fact that Samir talks about exclusivity and apartheid in a city where we live together, we eat together, we go on the same buses, we go to the same gyms, we go to the same restaurants, we go to the same cinemas, is an insult to the apartheid regime of South Africa and to what people suffered there. It's a term which is lazy at best and slanderous at worst. And it continues, and it's catching on because of the anti-Semitism going around the world. So that's what I want to say about that. And of course, he answered nothing about the question you put to him, why the Palestinian families signed the deal that then they reneged on. He cannot answer it because there's no reason except the Palestinian politicians trying to politicize a property dispute.
Okay. So I think you responded to that. Now, well, I think we've got to try and be a little bit careful that we don't open this up to be a discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because really that's not the topic that we're intending to talk about today. So just to try and bring things back to focus on the subject at hand. In just a month, less than a month's time, I think August the 2nd, we're going to see the court in Israel make a decision about what's happening with many of the residents in Sheikh Jarrah. Is this going to lead to another conflagration like what we witnessed just a couple of months ago? Is this a reason for this to suddenly blow up again? What is the threats that are emanating from many pro-Palestinian sources? Are they going to lead to a fiery situation that can be rather problematic and become a real political nightmare for all parties concerned? So let's focus as much as we can on the situation with the potential evictions and demolitions. And I'll hand the back to Fleur, if you can have 10 minutes max, and then I'll go back to Samir to sum up in another 10 minutes following that. So Fleur, do you want to take over and do your summation?
Well, I think that, look, I'm hoping that there's no, I'm hoping that we can continue arguing forever. But when it gets to the realm of throwing rockets and conflict and war and people dying and children dying in Gaza, in Israel, everywhere, nothing justifies those types of means. But there are people who it is their political interest in seeing dead bodies on both sides. Certainly it is Hamas's raison d'etre. You know, they don't believe, like Samar does, in the two-state solution. They believe in eventually kicking out all the Jews. They believe in the right of return. And, you know, Samar is talking about the refugees. The right of return means that the extermination of the state of Israel. It's not possible anyway. And so I'm praying as a Jerusalemite, as a person of peace, as a person who has friends on all sides, that the cynical leadership doesn't continue using its people in order to conflagrate a conflict that only they benefit from. Nobody benefits. You can see what's going on in Gaza right now and the rehabilitation that has to take place after the last conflict and a war that we didn't start, on these provocations that were co-opted and conflagrated in order to serve their own political purposes. So could it happen? Of course it could. We're in Jerusalem, we're in the Middle East, anything can happen here. But I'm just hoping that cool heads will rule. I'm hoping that we will find a humane solution for these families. I would put back on the table the protected tenancy option. I really would, even if the date has passed. But I would definitely put it back on the table from a legal perspective. And again, our courts are courts that have, you know, made a lot of decisions against many Israelis and pro-Palestinians and Arabs. And I think it's unfair to say that it's an unjust court system. I think, of course, a country, Israel, because of its sovereignty and because of its self-preservation, has to pass laws that protect us, has to pass laws that preserve the Jewish identity of the state of Israel. Yes, there's only one Jewish country in the world, and there's no shame in every single country can protect itself in the way that they see fit. Every single country can decide what immigration laws they pass, and most countries do that without anybody criticizing them. But of course, Israel is always under a microscope. Whatever we do is conflagrated, to be seen as unjust. Every country gets a pass. You know, in Jordan, a Jew, not an Israeli, a Jew can't own land. Nobody talks about that, of course, because it's Jordan, it's not Israel. So ultimately, I'm just hoping that cool heads will rule, that we will find a humane solution for these families, that we will find a way to continue building Jerusalem also for Arab residents of the city, that we will find a way of, we are now in September, we are launching a new master plan for East Jerusalem that has involved local leadership that have sat with us, and we have reached agreements by consensus. Many agreements, many of the plans that we originally have been thrown by the wayside because the local Arab leadership were not happy with it. And the mayor said, we're not leaving this room until we find a compromise solution. And in September, we will be launching the new master plan for East Jerusalem that has involved many hours and months of hard work, of consultation and deliberation. And so I'm hoping that will create some law and order, that will create some clarity, that will create some planning clarity. And according to that, we will keep providing new housing for East Jerusalem residents, new schools as we have done. We're just opening a country club now in Bet Hanina with an Olympic-sized pool. We're just building the largest park in East Jerusalem. And so we will continue to provide services and provide infrastructure and continue developing the economy in East Jerusalem. In the Jerusalem municipality, we're not the ones who are going to bring a political solution. All we can do is improve people's lives. And although it's painful now because we're having to pull down illegal structures that were built on parks, on streams, on green land, we have to find ways to compensate those families. We have to find a way of giving permits to those families. But ultimately, we have to find a way to regulate and bring order to the Wild West that exists in East Jerusalem. I'm not blaming the people who built illegally because for years they couldn't get permits, but it is a Wild West. And we are a society of law and order. We are a society of rules, and we have to bring some rules and regulation. And of course, ultimately, the most important thing, opportunity. And that's what I work on every day.
Thank you very much for summing up. And I'll now ask Samir if he would like also to say some final words on his point of view on the subject of.
Well, for me, I think the decision on evicting or not on the evictions is not legal, and in a way or another, the political level, the government can influence, can pause, can delay the process. This is a very political issue. East Jerusalem as a whole is occupied. Nobody in the world except for Israel and few countries, 2-3 countries, that recognize the sovereignty of Israel in East Jerusalem. So whatever happens in Jerusalem is very political, and it attracts the attention of the whole world. 2 members of Al-Kurd family, which is one of the families that are under the threat of being evicted. These young people, Muhammad Al-Kurd and Mona Al-Kurd, they have reached in few months from 1,000 followers in Twitter to 2 million followers. Everybody in the world is just waiting for any statement to be issued by these 2 people. This shows you the power of the cause, the solidarity all over the world on what's happening on the Sheikh Jarrah. And Israel should not underestimate that this could put Israel in a very serious diplomatic problem facing the whole world, because everybody from the Europeans, even the Americans, they have clarified their position that they are against the eviction and that Israel should pause the eviction, delay it, cancel it. So it's Israel against the whole world, and Israel needs to decide whether it should continue to be the bully, the guy that is bullying everybody in the region, or to start acting in a very reasonable way and assuming responsibility. The occupation comes with a lot of responsibility in the international law, and Israel should be able to realize this and not go far away, depart this international law, because it will be isolated more and more. We don't want to see Israel isolated. We don't want to see Israel in a serious diplomatic crisis. We want to see Israel integrated, but the only way, the only path is solving the Palestinian question. If these Abraham Accords, internally and externally, that Fleur has mentioned, if these continue every day, and if Israel raises a flag in every Arab capital, it does not help millions of Israelis and millions of Palestinians who are facing each other in the street. Peace, real peace for Israelis comes with Palestinians, with millions of Palestinians who you see them every time from your window, who you pass every time, Arab villages when you drive from somewhere to somewhere. So peace is essential and is important for Israelis to be reached with the Palestinians. This is the step, the cornerstone for a real peace, for stability, for getting Israel integrated more and more. The Abraham Accord has been months ago now, maybe 1 year. And up till now, there were around 1 million Israelis who have visited United Arab Emirates. There are daily flights from Tel Aviv to Dubai and to Abu Dhabi that are full of Israelis and no Emiratis. This tells you a lot, that although it is a very
Samer, we've been
sincere
closed
peace.
because of Corona. Don't misrepresent. We're not open.
Well,
We're
the
not
Corona
open.
exists. Well,
We're
the
not
Corona,
open.
the Corona.
Our
Well, the
airports
Corona,
are closed to
the
foreigners,
Corona,
Samer. Don't twist
the
things.
Corona, Fleur, the Corona could have restricted Israelis traveling to United Arab Emirates. I was in Abu Dhabi last week, and
There's
I came, it was red.
150,000 Israelis who've been to the UAE since the beginning of the Abraham Accords. Nobody's come this way because we're closed. English people also haven't come, and Dutch people also haven't come. So don't twist it.
So let's see when it opens. You will realize that for those Arab countries, for those Arab people to feel comfortable to visit, to feel very convenient to come and touch bases with you, they need to see a solution for the Palestinians, because no Arab, whatever is his nationality, will come and enter into East Jerusalem and see Palestinians suffering and keep smiling. It
I
affects,
think they're going to see not many Palestinians suffering in East Jerusalem. Maybe when they go to Gaza, they'll see them suffering over there. They're suffering a lot less over here.
So
well, you interrupt me, but I like it. It's okay.
Yeah, let Samir finish in a few minutes, and then we can close with you just speaking freely with one another.
Okay, so again, let's dig into the roots of the problem. Let's see the global atmosphere and environment and historical background of the problem, and let's start from there, because picking details and trying to find some justification for some details, this does not help us in getting rid of the problem. I am very much optimistic, and I believe I know a lot of Israelis in my life. I started dialogue with the Israelis from 94, when the leadership of Fatah Youth started talking with the leadership of the Labor Youth at that time, and then in 96 we continued the dialogue with the Likud Youth at that time. And I know Israelis from the right, from the left, from the center, from everybody, from everywhere. We are capable to reach peace. We just need to be able to recognize the other needs, admit it, and try to have mutual recognitions. It's not important only to see my needs. Yes, you have historical link, historical claims, historical needs. You have your identity. You are part of this country, but we equally have the same right to this country, the same link, the same history. We always existed next to you. So if you have an aspiration to do a Jewish state with 5 million Palestinians will never be democratic. You cannot have a Jewish state and a democratic state and millions of Palestinians at the same time that are enjoying the same rights. It doesn't work. So you need to sacrifice something. In a way or another, I think we can.
You're absolutely right about one thing. The problem here is the historical roots, and the historical roots are very simple. That the Palestinians, or at the time the Arab countries around us, didn't want to accept the fact that a Jewish state would be here. Once we solve the problem of you recognizing that we are here, maybe we can start talking from that moment on. And you know better than anybody, Samuel, that Israel has reached out in peace. They did during Oslo. We did again during Ehud Barak. We did again Olmert. Every single time that we've been ready to give painful compromises, pull our own people back from our indigenous land of Judea and Samaria, where the Jewish people were created, where we were born. You have not had the courage to take peace and create your own state. You have not had that courage, and that is not our fault. That is the fault of your bankrupt and corrupt leadership. So the first thing you need to do is put a mirror in front of your face, because I've already putting a mirror in front of my face. Believe me, because that's what I do every single day in order to make people's rights, give equal opportunities to everybody living in my city. So the root of this problem is that you don't accept that we should be here at all. Maybe you personally do, Samuel, but your leadership has never really properly accepted it. And the proof of that is that your school books, which are funded by UNRWA, still talk about the right of return, still talk about the fact that Jews are going into the sea, still talk about incitement, still talk about anti-Semitism. The minute that you teach your children that the Jews are not going away, that's what we can start having peace. Because my children learn about the Arab heritage of Israel. My children learn about living side and side in peace. But unfortunately, your children are being taught to hate and to kick us out. So that's the root of the conflict. You solve that, and we will make peace the very next day.
Well, there is a lot of hatred on both sides, Fleur, unfortunately. I can see
not in
hatred.
our school system, Samer. I can show you my
also
not in my
there.
school system. Not at
Fleur,
all.
maybe not in the books, but in what's the teacher discuss in the classroom, and what's the kids talk. They describe the Arabic language as hablanit, safa hablanit. I've seen this a lot everywhere.
Arabic is the second language in the school curriculum in the state of Israel.
Some of your kids.
Arabic. Are your children learning Hebrew in Jerusalem? No, they're not. And that's a way that your leadership keeps your people poor and ignorant and avoiding integration and getting the bad jobs because you don't teach Hebrew on purpose. My children are learning Arabic. Change that.
Well, Fleur, you don't leave me to say something to continue until the end, but it's okay.
Now you know how my husband feels, Samer.
Well, he's lucky anyway. He's lucky. I'll tell you something. I propose to you to have a committee that have some friends, some of you of your Arab friends that you trust. I trust everybody you know in the Arab world. I trust all of them. You pick 2-3 of them, and 2-3 Israelis and 2-3 Palestinians. Let's have a committee of 9 people, 3 from each side, and let's study the environment of hatred, not only the textbook. Let's try to see what the kids are learning in the street, in the sport clubs, when they have the break in the school, what discussion happens in crisis in the schoolroom, because we have a lot of videos in the YouTube and it shows that there is a lot of hatred on both sides. Kids are victims of hatred. And unfortunately, we need to get rid of this. We need to see how we can raise up these kids. Maybe it is 10% problem in one side and 90% problem, but it exists on both sides with different levels. I'm not one that have studied what's happening in each side, but it's there. If we want to get rid of this disease, we need to acknowledge that it exists on both sides with different ratios, and we need to study it, identify it, and then work against it. And I put my hand with your hand, Fleur.
I accept your proposal.
Let me tell you something. Whatever mistakes have been done in the past, at least I was not living at that time when in the 48 somebody has rejected, and you were not there also. This does not change a fact that there are millions of Jews and Palestinians living together in the same piece of land. Now it's a fact, 50% in the same land. I'm talking about the land between the river and the Mediterranean. There are 7 million Palestinians, 7 million Jews who are living in the same land. We need now to be creative in finding a solution how we can survive together, maintaining your needs of having a Jewish home, maintaining your needs that you need to control your own security, because I recognize Holocaust and I respect its memory. And I know that you cannot sacrifice your own security, controlling your own security. You don't need to be majority in this land. You need to maintain power. And there is a difference. For me, in a one-state solution, I don't mind that the army is Jewish, pure Jewish. So for me, it's nice. As far as I am granted equal rights in all aspects of the life, that I feel I belong to this place. I feel that this place protects me also and give me equality.
You know, the 20% of the Arab Israelis living in this country have that protection. You know that. Citizens of this country, we do not make a difference, and citizens of this country have that protection. And Jerusalemites
the nation state law has proven again that there is discrimination against these 20% of people.
Don't bring me the nation state law. Hasn't even been passed yet. hasn't even been passed yet, and all it does is protect the Jewish character of the state of Israel. We only have one Jewish country. We've suffered enough for thousands of years that we need to protect ourselves and the future of our people, and you know that. And so,
yes, both of us, Fleur, both of us
need improvement, but ultimately the nation-state law is there to protect the Jewish character of the state of Israel.
Fleur, both of us, we belong to the same land. Also, I don't belong to Jordan. There are maybe 20 Arab countries, but it's not mine. I belong to this land, you belong to this land, and we need to keep belonging to the same land.
Samer,
This land needs to be ours.
This
This city needs to be ours.
We'll continue trying because it's our moral duty to continue seeking peace. And so the minute the Palestinian leadership, first of all, gets their act together and it's not divided into 7, and secondly, actually genuinely can come and deliver peace, you will always find a peace partner in the state of Israel. That I can guarantee.
Well, I need to say something final to end my presentation. I knew and I learned that Judaism has brought to the world some very important values. You have taught the world, you have taught humanity the value of human dignity, which is very important to you. I just want you to treat the Palestinian with your values, on the basis of your values, to try to find a way that Palestinians are treated with human dignity, which is very important also to us. So we accept to be treated based on values that were created, were invented, were taught by Judaism to the whole humanity. Start seeing us as people who qualify to be treated with these values.
We already
you are Fleur, you are the powerful side of this equation. Israel alone can define the final status, can define the political settlement alone, because you possess the power.
Alone doesn't work,
You
Samer.
possess
Look what
the
happened in
military
Gaza.
power. You possess the economic
Alone
power.
doesn't work. Alone doesn't work. We left Gaza. What happened? We get thousands of rockets. We get your people, your Fatah people, being killed by Hamas to kick you out of Gaza. You know that, okay? You've got a violence problem.
Localized.
You guys have a terrorism
because you
problem.
localize the problem. You localize the problem.
So
You wanted to get rid of Gaza because it does not work.
Now it's our fault that we left Gaza.
It does not pay back to you. It was a self-interest decision, not for the sake of the Palestinians. But we don't want you to leave Gaza alone.
There's a moment you could have.
We want geographical integrity between the West Bank and Gaza. We want the unity between our people. We want freedom. We want the Gazans to be able to swim, to fish inside the sea. You control them from the sea, from the air, from the land.
We didn't try in the 90s, and we didn't try in 2001, or we didn't try in 2005, we didn't try in 2008. Who rejected these peace talks? Come on.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, it's been really intriguing conversation we've had, and I must congratulate you both on being very civil. I've had a debate once a number of years ago between two Jews who were arguing about the two-state solution. I tell you that wasn't very civil in the end. It was I know the sparks were really flying, and it got to the point of being almost.
Well, this is because we're both Jerusalemites.
So I respect, and I think you made a suggestion at one point, Samir, about getting together to discuss this inherent fundamental issues of hatred and ill feeling that's had between one side and the other. If you can actually channel that into something constructive out of what we've been talking about today, that would be a wonderful result from our little debate we've had.
I elect Fleur to be the head of the committee. I would love to join her, and she can choose the rest of the committee. It's serious. Let's start doing something, Fleur, on this.
Let's do it, Samer. Deal.
Great. Deal. Great. Thanks a lot.
I thank you both very much for what you've contributed to our debate today, and I hope for the benefit of our audience that they've heard many different points of view, and of course there's a lot of disagreement, but I think it's been in good spirit the way it's been discussed, and I think it's added value to the overall consideration of this subject that's obviously very controversial and bothers a lot of people. So thank you both.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Fleur. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you both.